Okay, so now I'm going to go through some simple practical strategies that might be helpful for your church setting or youth organisation. Firstly, we're going to think about the importance of visuals and visual schedules. We know that young people with autism like to know what's happening, and we also know that they have strengths with visual information. So presenting information visually for a child or young person can be really helpful. It may look like a visual schedule on the wall, where we have used symbols to identify what is happening in the session. So playtime, circle time, singing, listening to a story, praying, and it's always good for children and young people to know they will go home. So this can be really helpful for everybody within the session. We know that life doesn't always go as planned, and sometimes there are changes. We can also use a change symbol whenever we are using that information visually as well. For example, if the person telling the story wasn't able to be there that day, you could use a no symbol. So no listening to story. Today we're going to watch the screen, so that the child can visually see that there's no listening to story, we're going to watch the screen. For some children, it might be better to have an individual schedule. So it might look something like this, where down the side it identifies what is happening next using symbols, what there's time for, and then when that is finished, it can be removed and posted because it's all done. For some children, that might be too much information. So going back to just 2 parts, you might use first and then. So first, craft, then games. And this is a really useful strategy that you can use even when presenting information verbally. So first, we're going to do art and craft, and then you get to play your favourite game. So just breaking the information down first and then. It can be useful to present schedules either through objects, through symbols that are shown here. You can also use photographs or downloading images from the internet. There's lots of different ways to present information visually. If the child or young person is older and they're able to read and have good literacy, a simple checklist might also be helpful. This could be on an A4 page, it could be on a post-it in their pocket, or for all the tech-savvy teens, it might just be a note or a list on their phone that they can refer to I suppose, increase their independence. It helps with the predictability of what's going to happen in a session, and that will hopefully reduce their anxiety because they know what's happening and when the session will finish. And another aspect is using a whiteboard. You do not need to be an artist. You can just use a stick line man drawing. I'm going to give it a go to show you. So even splitting the board into 2, you can say first, we're going to do some singing, and then we're going to watch the television. So those are some simple practical strategies of how to incorporate visual schedules into your session. Another really important part to think about is your environment and how you might physically be able to structure the space that you have. I know this will be different for every church and organisation, but it's really good to have a think about what space you have and how you could perhaps zone areas. You might be able to use things like sofas or chairs to create a quieter corner space. You might use tables to block off an area for free play where there's lots of running about and noise. You can also use things like hoops to identify the space where you want children to sit in. So if they're sitting within the yellow hoop, they have that amount of space. If they want to sit in the red hoop, they've got a little bit more. So you can use hoops, simple cushions, circles. You can also use spots. If you don't have those types of things, even masking tape can be really helpful. If you look, you can see the X. So you could say sit on the X. And that means the child is visually able to see what you're saying. If I give an instruction where I say, okay, boys and girls, it's time to line up, that can be really confusing for a child with autism. Where are you meant to line up? How am I meant to know how to do that? Whenever we present that information visually, it gives increased clarity and structure, and that can really help the child to follow the instructions and understand what they're doing. So for example, if I say, look, I want you to line up on the blue line, that's really much clearer that they know where they are meant to line up. So something else you can use are mats. So for example, using something like this or a larger mat to zone an area. So maybe an area where you want children or young people to sit and listen to a story, or maybe there is an area where it's a particular art and craft zone and you have that specific area cordoned off. It's also good to have these areas and zones familiar so that every week the child will know, oh, look, it's time for circle time. I know I need to sit on the blue circle. So they're familiar with that each week. Time can be a really difficult concept for lots of children to understand, but particularly for children and young people with autism. We use phrases like in a minute, or I'll do that in a while, or yeah, you'll do that later. That can be really confusing and at times frustrating for children and young people with autism. So time is a difficult concept to show visually, but there are ways to do it. You can download and use lots of timers from the internet, so visual timers on a screen or on a phone. There is an app called the Time Timer, which I have on my phone, which I'll show you now. So this can be a really good way to show time visually. If I set the time for 15 minutes, and I press play, then the red will disappear. That will really help the child to understand that time is less and less. They'll be able to understand, oh, I've got 5 minutes left. And then when the red disappears, the time is all done and the activity is finished. Other timers you can use are sand timers. So you can get really big ones that you can use for an entire group. You can get slightly smaller ones, or you could also use individual ones if a specific child is maybe doing a task or something that they've only got a limited amount of time for. It can really help with transitions and ending of activities as well, because the information is presented clearly. You can't always argue with a timer. Another example is a countdown strip. So even just that actually you're going to have 5 minutes. And when the minute is up, and trying to be consistent and accurate with your time, that each minute is a minute. 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. Oh, 1 minute left. Oh, time is all done. So using a countdown strip can be really helpful as well. So that's the concept of time. Another really important factor for all children, and especially children with autism, is setting the expectations and boundaries of what is expected in a session. So what are the rules for your group? Maybe you and your leaders and the children will have decided these before. Again, it can be really useful to present the rules visually. So having a short and simple selection of rules. So you want good sitting, good listening, good looking, good thinking, and quiet mouth. So you might want to display these and refer back to them, especially whenever maybe the kids are getting a little bit noisier or they're maybe forgetting some of the rules. And it can be nice to say, oh, I see Sarah and she is doing lovely sitting. Or look, Ben is doing really good listening. Well done, Ben. So reinforcing and promoting that positive reinforcement of the children that are following the rules well will help children who are maybe not. So using rules for the whole group, you can put those up on the wall. For some children, it might be helpful to have the rules on a small key ring. You can keep these with you. And again, it's when we present information verbally, we can listen to that information and we can remember it. But for some children and young people with autism, we say that information verbally and it disappears. Whereas when we present information visually, they're able to refer back to it, look at it, and take their time. So if I want somebody to be quiet, maybe even just pointing to the symbol, that can be really helpful for them. Other ways you can use this are having a post-it and a pen in your pocket and doing a simple drawing. So first we're going to be quiet, then you get to go and play your games. And the last part to think about is that for some children with all of the sensory elements in the environment, lots of noise, maybe people bumping into them, bright lights, a busy, crowded environment at times, sometimes that can be too much for their sensory systems, and they may need time to calm and to regulate themselves. So it can be really helpful to let children and young people with autism know that it's okay if they need to take a break. That can prevent them feeling anxious or stressed and generally can make the experience much better for them. So some children might use a I need a break card where they can bring that to a familiar adult and say, do you know what, it's a bit too much for me at the minute. I think I need to take a break. And it's okay for them to maybe go to a quiet area or out for a walk just so that they can calm and resettle themselves, and then they can come back in and join the group. So some children and young people with autism can find it difficult to sit still, listen and pay attention. For some children, use of fidget items can be really helpful to help keep their attention and keep their hands busy, maybe whilst they're listening. You might also want to include a box of fidget toys in the quiet or the calm down area as a way of helping them to calm. So there are lots of different items that you can include. There's some examples here. So a nice stress ball, give it a good squeeze and hopefully feel a little bit happier after. Using tangles, so that might be for a child who is able to listen to a story, but having something in their hands will keep their attention in that calm, alert state. Maybe for a child who is more interested in visual, calming objects, looking at something like this might be really calming for them. There's lots of different items that you can get, and these don't have to be expensive or from specialist shops. Sometimes you can pick them up in a local grocery store, you can get them online or in random toy shops or pound shops. There's lots of different items that they can use. It's also worthwhile thinking of what the rules for the fidget box are. So maybe there's no throwing of the fidget toys. You hold the fidget toys in your hand. And if you don't keep those rules, then we'll put them back in the box. So it might also be worthwhile considering if there is an area or a space within your church building or youth organisation structure that you could have a space for a quiet or a chill out area. This shouldn't be used as punishment, or it also shouldn't be filled with all of their favourite things because they will not want to leave it, but it should be a space where they can go to just calm down, help gather their scattered senses, settle, and then they're able to rejoin the group. Hopefully some of these strategies and tips have been beneficial, and there may be some things that you now think about in your own organisation or church group, and maybe different ways to incorporate some of these in to make the church experience hopefully better for young people or children with autism.